Now, the Ghana card has come back into the conversation, not just because of SIM card registration, but because of something quite political. The Electoral Commission has announced again that they will be doing a voters register. Many analysts and civil society do not really understand why we need another voters register. The Electoral Commission says that for this particular voters register, only the Ghana card would be the source document to identify people. Just that. No passport, no national insurance, nothing. Just the Ghana card for those who have Ghana card. I'm not so sure for those who don't have Ghana card what's going to happen, but we're here to engage the Electoral Commission on that. But preliminary commentary on this one has already put out the National Democratic Congress beginning to resist this effort in using Ghana card to register, being the sole source to register, because they suspect that this could disenfranchise people who don't have the ID card. That's an argument they make, because we shouldn't adopt any system that will disenfranchise people. So that's what Asiedu Nketia said. National identification card. So viewers, this is the history that we have uncovered for you. So it goes as follows. Before independence, there was no system of identifying Gold Coasters. The colonial government will normally issue passports to persons who were to travel. This was useful to travel at the secondary port, since that was the main avenue for international travel. National identification cards were only reserved for British citizens who lived in the United Kingdom and not other colonies or dominions. So the national registration card, the photograph that you see here, is a card that the photograph you see on the left side of your screen. The second one, the lighter one, is a card that the British issued to their citizens. They didn't issue that to the colonies. So in the colonies, the only way you'll be identified is that you have the opportunity to travel, usually to the United Kingdom for study or medicals or something like that. Many of them for study, you will be issued with a passport, and then that identifies you as a Kofi Menu or Akwete Jr. or something like that. That takes you to England to study. All right, so let's come now to the first attempt that was made under post-colonial Ghana. So immediately after independence, national ID card was not properly discussed. There was a census that was conducted by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's government, I believe sometime before independence, and it was said that there are 5 million people in Ghana. It was estimated that there are 5 million people in Ghana at the time, but no real ID card conversation occurred until 1973, and this is how it occurred. So that was the first attempt. During the first year of General Ignatius Kutu Acheampong as head of state in 1973, the cards were issued to persons in the border regions of Volta, Upper Region, parts of the Western Region, and the Bono-Ahafo Region. Now, this is very significant. This is very, very significant in the conversation that we're having about ID card. When Acheampong started, because he didn't have money to do the whole of Ghana, he said, let me do the border towns. Because it is in these border towns that you have the influx of non-Ghanaians mixing up with Ghanaians, and then we are not sure who is Ghanaian and who is not Ghanaian. So he wanted to go to the border towns and use a decree to register Ghanaians at the border town. So we know that these are Ghanaians, their colleagues are Togolese, their relatives may be Togolese, they may be Ghanaian, yes, but that's allowed. That happens in the world. There are people whose relatives are Belgian and then they are French. And if you look at French and Belgium, you look at Germany and Austria, all of these countries that have borders have these kinds of problems. So you have a border where the two groups of people speak the same language, Germany and Austria. There's always a big difference to tell who is German and who is Austrian. We know the story about people saying Adolf Hitler himself was Austrian and all of that. Yeah. So Acheampong wanted to do this at the border towns so that we will be able to have clarity about in those towns, in Aneho and places like that, who is Ghanaian and who is not Ghanaian. That's what Acheampong did. Let's read it again. He said the cards were to be issued for persons in the border regions of Volta, Upper Region, parts of the Western Region, and the Bono-Ahafo Region. He did this through the National Redemption Council Decree 129 in 1972. In 1972, NRC Decree 129 was passed, and therein Acheampong put in this ID card matter and wanted to register Ghanaians at the border, okay? The story says, however, it was ended in 3 years due to lack of funds and logistical challenges. So the results, as we put the verdict over here, you can see the result is that it was unsuccessful. Now, we do not know how many people were registered in the Acheampong situation. The people that took over from him did not really check. And we do not know what those cards were used for. We do not know how much funding went into it. And we do not know why they couldn't secure funds, whether it was a national budget deficit that couldn't pay for it, Whether they were raising money for it and they couldn't raise, we really do not know. But this is the story that we have inherited from the research, that this is what Acheampong did. He tried to do it. He did it in the border towns. Some thinking must have gone into deciding that you do it in the border towns, you see. And I'm guessing that the thinking that went to it was so that we can identify in the problematic border areas who is Ghanaian and who is a friend of Ghana or a brother of Ghana, but not actually Ghanaian, okay? Right. So let's go on. Now, the second attempt was here. Now, we put Justice D.F. Anand's photograph here for a reason. Let's go through the details. The PNDC, which is Rawlins's Provisional National Defense Council, set up committees, including a technical implementation committee for the implementation of the Ghana card concept. This was under the policy framework of the National Commission for Democracy because it was believed that a national identification card was necessary for the pursuit of democracy and fair elections. So you see, when you look at the history of some of these things, you get to understand the future, and that's why they say history is very important. The thinking that had gone into Ghana creating an ID card from the beginning, we've looked at Acheampong's era, and we're looking at the PNDC era led by Justice D.F. Anand. I'm not sure why this does not find expression in D.F. Anand's book, neither does it find expression in Kwame Ahoy's book, both books written by Ahoy. This does not find expression in it because Professor Ahoy talks about local government and all of that. But somehow, I stand to be corrected, though. I can check again. But checking today, I didn't see this finding expression either in D.F. Anand's book or Professor Kwame Ahoy's book. Let's see if some people have read the book and they've seen it. Let's have a look at it because this is very important. The PNDC, which was ushering Ghana into the Fourth Republican Democratic Dispensation. As you know, the PNDC overthrew the Third Republic. They had a responsibility to create a new democratic era for Ghana because the international pressure was coming. Justice D.F. Anand was one of the key voices advocating that the PNDC should come out and have a democratic handover. So he was important in this. He was leading the National Commission for Democracy that went around the country to ascertain Ghanaians' appetite for a new democratic system of government. And they came to the conclusion that the overwhelming majority of Ghanaians wanted the PNDC out and wanted a new democratic system in. Now, as part of the work that Justice Anand was doing, they wanted to do a national identification card. And they believed that the national identification card was necessary for the pursuit of democracy. That is important. Democracy has a lot to do with identifying people, putting people in social stratification so that the national budget will determine where things go. Today we talk about free SHS and we say, let those who can pay, pay. If we had established a national identification system from 1973, it would be obvious for the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Education to determine that this person can pay and this person cannot pay. Now we don't have that, you see. So the ID card is important for the pursuit of democracy. The PNDC was right. And they added, I wish they should have underlined this one, for the pursuit of democracy and for fair elections. They didn't actually say free elections. That's also quite instructive because free election is being able to go and vote at the ballot and you are free to do that. Fair elections is about the result and it's about who is qualified to vote. That's where the elections are fair or unfair. It's the freedom of the election is the conduct of the process. Can you walk to the ballot box and just put your ballot paper in, irrespective of who you are? You don't have to be the police commander in the district. You don't have to be the original. Can you, as an ordinary person, walk into a polling station and then just vote? Yes, that's freedom of election. So that's why they say free and fair. They are not the same thing. Free and fair are not the same thing. Here, the PNDC was not so concerned about the free, but they were concerned about the fair because the purpose of the ID card is to ensure fair elections. Fair elections means fair elections actually directly speaks to legibility of voters. That's what fair elections speaks to. Fair elections speaks to the eligibility of voters, whether the voter, the person casting the ballot is eligible. That's why you can be in America on voting day. You can be living close to the ballot box, the polling station. That's not your passport to vote. Your passport to cast a ballot in America, in Britain, or Austria, in Australia, or Ghana is not your proximity to the ballot. It is your legibility. As a citizen, Ghanaian, or whatever the eligibility criteria is, you must have qualified for the eligibility to go and cast a ballot. It's not your proximity to, it's not that I'm in Ghana at the time. It's not that I was part of the discussion. It's not that my uncle is a member of parliament. It's not that I can speak the language. No, all those are not the criteria. The criteria for eligibility is determined by citizenship and is determined by the laws of the country and the people. So the PNDC was concerned that they needed to do the ID card to be able to secure fair elections. If you know Justice Anand, as some of us do know him in a little bit, you will know that that will be his thinking. Justice Anand is a very pure Democrat. and he really wanted democracy to thrive in Ghana. We saw his role as Speaker of Parliament and how he conducted himself when the opposition came in, how he worked with the opposition to ensure that the laws of Ghana are standing well, how he will not continue with the process in Parliament because a writ has been filed in the Supreme Court. He will respect the court to finish the process. That's just Zanan for you, So when you see this, his committee thinking about fair elections because of ID card, then you know that Ghana was in the right place at the time and Ghana was going through the right thinking processes. Let's go on and see what happened. Then there was a third attempt, and that was done by John Ajekum Kuffour. Now, in 2001, under John Ajekum Kuffour, a technical committee was set up to look into the issue. The findings were submitted to Cabinet, and in 2003, the National Identification Secretariat was set up. In 2006, the Secretariat became known as the National Identification Authority. So that's what we still have here. What John Ajekum Kuffour started is what we still have. Now, what John Ajekum Kuffour started had precursors. The Colonial Authority did it in a minimal form by issuing passports to travelers. Then nothing happened until Acheampong's regime, where he said that, okay, if we can't do the whole country, let's go to the border towns and secure it. It was not successful. They did issue some ID cards, but it was not successful. And then they came up later on in the John Ajekum Kuffour era, in the Justice DFN and PNDC era, where they said we need to do this thing. We need to do it because we have to use it to support democracy, and we have to secure fair elections in the democracy that we're about to start. The elections must always be fair, so we need to do it, And then they also couldn't get around to do it. Then John Ajekum Kuffour comes and says, no, now we have to take a bold step. So this was the first major bold step taken to procure ID card for the whole of Ghana. And it was done through Kuffour's cabinet, and they set up the National Identification Authority. Okay, now the third attempt, a pilot mass registration exercise was held to test the forms and equipment deployed for the exercise, as well as the registration process as outlined by the authority. This pilot registration exercise took place in two communities, Abokobi and Sege, in the Greater Accra region for 10 days, from July 27 to August 4th, 2007. Now that's the real history. That's the work that has been done. So the NIA and Kuffour did these things. They set up a pilot system, which is always necessary for things like. They set up a pilot system, and they did it between Abokobi and Sege in the Greater Accra regions. And we're not sure what the results of that are, but let's move on. Okay, so the third attempt. The testing, selection, and training of staff for the Central and Western regions were executed successfully, with mass registration taking off in the Central region on 1st July 2008. However, there was a lack of will to push for the full implementation of the card to cover all Ghanaians. And so we give this verdict partially successful. So the political will is always important. And I'm guessing that in 2008, 1st July, there was election in December 2008. It's a big election. So I'm guessing the political will must have waned in favor of the processes leading to the national election. So voters registration card was going to be, a new voters roll was going to be set up. The election was crucial. MPP were looking for a third term. NDC had been in opposition twice. Professor Mills was running his third campaign. So by July in 2008, it is expected that political will about a matter like the ID card, significant as it is, will pale into insignificance as far as the elections of December is concerned. So we can understand and forgive the people of the day who sort of didn't show the political will to continue. But let's see what happened after that. Okay, the Parliament of Ghana. The Parliament of Ghana passed the National Identification Act in 2006. We should have done this before, though. So this 2006. In building up the chronology, we're already on 2008. So let me take you back to 2006. The Parliament of Ghana passed the Identification Authority Act 2006, Act 707. The act was, among others, established an authority responsible for the issue of national identification cards. Okay, then comes January 2008. Okay, this also should have happened before. Parliament of Ghana passed the National Identification Act 2008. The act was to, among others, provide for the capture of personal information of individuals by the authority for the issue of national identification card. Section 18.1 of Act 707 empowers the minister to make legislative instruments to, among others, provide for the uses to which the card shall be put. Now, this is also very significant. Now, this is happening in 2008 when John Kuffour is still president, okay? The Section 18.1 of the act that was passed by J.A. Kuffour, which is Act 707, empowers the minister to make legislative instruments to, among others, provide for the uses to which the card shall be put. Okay. So Act 707 is created. Then Section 18(1) thereof says that the minister responsible will take an LI to Parliament and then provide the uses to which the ID card will be put. Now, this is the story, okay? So President Kuffour does that in 2008. He doesn't proceed to implement Section 18(1) until his tenure of office is over. Let's see what happens when Professor Mills comes. What happens to Section 18(1), which is the part that requires the minister, or if you like, enjoins the minister to go to Parliament with a legislative instrument that will show and categorize, delineate, limit the uses to which the ID card of Ghanaian citizens can be put. Let's see what happens then. All right, so we proceed now to also Section 73(1) of Act 750, empower the minister to make legislative instruments to, among others, provide that every public office should demand the presentation of an ID card as a condition precedent to the provision of his service. Now, this is also very important. Another Act of Parliament, Act 750, 73(1) of it, empower the minister to make legislative instruments. So, minister has to make 2 legislative instruments. 1, for the delineation of the use of the card, and 2, to say that every public service should demand the presentation of the card as condition precedent for the provision of his services. Okay, now let's come to Professor Mills, who then inherited all of these legislative instruments. What happened under Professor Mills's regime? Here it goes. Honorable Alhassan Azongo, Minister for Public Sector Reform and MP for Bulsa South, prepared and laid before Parliament of Ghana, which passed the National Identification Register Regulation, Regulation 2012, LI 2111. Regulation 7 of LI 2111 is titled Mandatory Use of National ID Card. Regulation 7.1 says a national identity card issued to an individual shall be used for the following transactions where identification is required. And viewers, read it yourself. Number 1 is what? Put that thing on the screen, let the viewers read it. Number 1, registration of voters. That's in the LI. I didn't pass the LI. It was passed by Honorable Alhassan Azongo, the Member of Parliament for Bulsa South, Professor Mills's minister, who just inherited the Acts 707 and Act 750 and was implementing it. This is the history of the matter, so it can get quite confusing if you look at the narrative of today and where people are standing today. It gets quite confusing, doesn't it? Because here's Professor Mills directing his minister to go to Parliament and continue with the implementation of 707 and 750. 707 18.1 requires the minister to delineate what the uses to which the card can be put. 750 requires the minister to say that public services or public institutions should demand the ID card before they can render their services to individual Ghanaians who show up for the service. And the first one they talk about in terms of the uses for the ID card in LI 211, implemented by the NDC minister, is the registration of voters. Number 2, registration of SIM cards. That's in the law. It's in the law passed by the National Democratic Congress. It's right there. It is true. That's not untrue. It is true. People may not like it, but this is true. This is the history of what happened. So when we are building a society, we are building a community, we need to go back and see where we are coming from. What is the philosophy behind this ID card? And that's the work that we sought to do here today. Let's get into the minds of the history, the people who did the thing. What were they thinking about? So that we can understand when there's controversy about ID card should be used for this, ID card cannot, and the whole fight about national identification. You cannot even understand it. A country, we have started doing ID cards since Acheampong era. For various reasons, we couldn't finish. Justice D.F. had a role to play. President Kuffour set up what we now have. Professor Mills continued it. Then we come to a place where people say, no, I don't want the ID card anymore. I don't want to use the ID card. You cannot use the ID card. You cannot force my people to use ID card. We will not use the ID card. We will boycott. That kind of language is not great for the development. And you know the kinds of people who spew out this language, you know what they are looking for? They want to cut the baby into two. I've always been saying that. The people who spew out this language, it's just the baby they want to divide into two so that we all go home. The baby is dead. It's fine, no problem. That's really when you have this. Because if you look at this history, then you can check it. It's verifiable. If you look at this history of ID card, should we be quarreling about ID card as a country right now? Should we? We shouldn't. If you look at the history, every political party has had a role to play. Every political party has had an addition to make. Every political party has provided thought processes towards this thing. It's not one political party saying we should do something. Even the people who are trying to implement it now, they didn't originate it. Somebody else originated it and they took it over. And we've been building from one generation of political executive leadership to the other generation of political executive leadership. Then we arrive at a place people want to draw up a cul-de-sac. When we have no cul-de-sac, we have a highway in front of us. Some people want to draw a cul-de-sac and say, hey, we've stopped here, we won't do it, we won't get it. I don't think that's great. But anyway, let's go on. So this is the Professor Mills one. All right. So we pulled out the Hansard in Parliament of 21st February 2012. It was on that day that the LI was laid before Parliament. And we'll take you through some of the comments in Parliament, just a few of them, and then we can understand it and close. Mr. Voka said, Mr. Speaker, may I respectfully apply for the Honorable Minister for Transport to lay item D for and on behalf of the Honorable Minister at the Office of the President who has traveled out of Accra. And then, Madam Speaker, clerk item D, okay. Then it continues, it says, by the Honorable Minister for Transport, Alhaji Collins Dauda, on behalf of the Honorable Minister at the Office of the President, National Identification Register Regulation 2012, LI 2107, referred to the Committee on Subsidiary Legislation. It goes on. Mr. Yalban Rose Del Hansard says, and then Madam Speaker speaks. He says, I thank you. If it is about the same matter, let us leave it and move on. Honorable Member, the paper you are deferring, is it only affecting D? And Mr. Veggie says, Madam Speaker, they are D and F and their subs. Okay, these are parliamentary stuff that can get a bit boring, but let's continue looking at it. What about G? That's Madam Speaker asking. It can be laid and E can be laid, and if E can be laid, then let us go on. So G for Ghana is the regulation that governs the ID card, just so that you know, so you can follow the conversation, okay? Dr. A.A. Osei says, Madam Speaker, that's Dr. Anthony Akoto Osei, by the way. It says, Madam Speaker, it is D, E, and F. Madam Speaker says, so we can go on to G. All right. Then Mr. Yalban says, Madam Speaker, I am the Vice Chairman of the Committee of Subsidiary Legislation. The Chairman, due to unavoidable circumstances, is not present in the House. So I am seeking your indulgence to lay the report on behalf of your committee. Madam Speaker says, all right, yes, let's do that. Mr. Yalban, on behalf of the committee chairman, lays the report on the Committee on Subsidiary Legislation on the National Identification Register Regulation 2012 LI 2107. Okay. So that's how LI 2107 was laid. And it said that the purposes for the ID card is registration of voters and registration of SIM card. This is 2012 under Speaker Joyce Bamford Addo. Now we also pulled this up. This is a minority underscores the need for every Ghanaian to get Ghana card. Sunday, it's a Ghana web story, Sunday, 9th June 2022. The Minority Caucus of Parliament on Friday underscored the need for every Ghanaian to have the national ID card. Okay, full stop. And it's attributed to Haruna Idrisu. Now, this is not surprising. This should not come as surprising to anyone. Because if you look at the processes that we've gone through on the ID card, the trajectory of it, yeah, this makes sense for the minority in 2022, in 19th June 2022, to come out and say that, yes, Ghanaians should accept the ID card. What are we hearing today from Johnson Asiedu Nketia? That he's the General Secretary of the NDC and that the NDC will not participate in using the ID card for the voters register. We do not really know whether the EC needs another voters register. I'm not sure about that. But if the EC needs another voters register, should the Ghana card be the only card to deal with it? The answer has to be yes. If you look at the history of the Ghana card and where it's come from. So this is just a photograph of the British passport as it then was, the one that they used to give to us. And then this is the national identification card in the British colonial era that they used to give to us. So here's our story, here's our song. We think that Asiedu Nketia is out of step. There's a record that the minority in the NDC said that the Ghana card is necessary. The conversation now is, should the Ghana card be the sole, only identification, source of identification for a next voters register, moving on to the Ghana card itself becoming the passport to be able to cast a ballot. We should be getting there where the Ghana card itself should be. And the Ghana card, which is not against anyone, it's not against any political party. How Asiedu Nketia thinks it's against some I don't understand it. How is Ghana card against somebody or for somebody? Ghana card is registering all Ghanaians. It's against somebody and it's for somebody. You know, this kind of politics that's sometimes we do in Ghana, it's not very great. Okay, so it's Asiedu Nketia and Jean Mensah. We were expecting them to meet at the course the other day. It didn't happen, but they were both there. They are different periods. So let's begin. Let's continue to interrogate this matter. To be fair to Asiedu Nketia, he's saying that if you use the Ghana card, you disenfranchise people. I'm guessing he's saying that because not everyone has the Ghana card as of today, even by the report of Kenatefa. And I think Electoral Commission is saying that we're going to do another new voters register next year, sometime next 2024, and the Ghana card will be the only identifying instrument for that. But we have showed you the history. Acheampong wanted to do it at the border towns because that's where the problem is. DFNI wanted to use it for fair election. Justice DFNI, he wanted to use it for fair election. Professor Mills asked his minister to take an ally to parliament following what John Kuffour did and said that the Ghana card will be used for the voters register and for the national SIM card. Come 2022, Haruna Idrisu and the minority in parliament urged Ghanaians that go and get a Ghana card. In August, Asiedu Nketia says no, we will not use Ghana card for the election. Okay, so the ball is in your court, viewers. What do you think? Send a message to our Facebook address. Good evening, Ghana Official.